Clara adjusted her scarf against the December chill, glancing down at her son, João, who skipped beside her, his small hand wrapped tightly around hers. His eyes sparkled with excitement, the kind of joy only a 6-year-old could muster at the prospect of meeting Santa Claus. She had worked a long shift at the boutique in the mall, but nothing could dampen her determination to make this moment special for João. It hadn't been easy. Between her meager wages and the mounting bills, Christmas had started to feel more like an obligation than a celebration. Still, she had saved what she could for a modest holiday. A tree with simple decorations, a few carefully chosen presents, and now this, João's first photo with Santa at the mall. The line to see Santa snake through the brightly decorated atrium, winding past giant candy canes, fake snow, and an enormous Christmas tree that sparkled with lights. Clara stood in line, chatting softly with João to keep him occupied. "Mom, do you think Santa will remember what I asked for?" João's voice was tinged with wonder. "I'm sure he will, sweetheart," Clara replied, ruffling his curls. "Santa never forgets." When they finally reached the front of the line, Clara felt a twinge of relief. The Santa Claus, dressed in a traditional red suit with a fluffy white beard, was laughing heartily as he posed with a group of siblings. As the last child climbed off his lap, the elf assistant gestured for João to step forward. "Your turn, honey," Clara said with a smile, gently nudging João forward. João hesitated, his excitement turning to shyness as he approached Santa. But before he could climb onto Santa's lap, the man raised a hand and frowned. "Hold on a second," Santa said, his booming voice suddenly lacking warmth. He glanced at the elf. "Didn't we say we were taking a break?" The elf looked confused. "No, you still have a few kids left." "I'm sorry, folks," Santa said loudly, addressing the line. "I need to step away for a moment. We'll resume shortly." He stood, smoothing his suit, and without another word, walked off toward a staff-only area. Clara froze. The murmurs in the line grew louder as people exchanged puzzled looks. She knelt beside João, who stared at Santa's retreating figure with a mix of confusion and disappointment. "Why did Santa leave, Mom?" João asked, his voice trembling. Clara's heart ached as she searched for an answer. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said softly, pulling him into a hug. But she did know. She had seen the flicker of discomfort in Santa's eyes when he looked at João. She had seen it countless times before, in shops, at school meetings, even in the occasional sideways glance from her coworkers. That unspoken judgment, the one that said, "You don't belong here." Before Clara could process what to do, a man further back in the line spoke up. "What was that about?" "He just walked off." Another parent chimed in. "Yeah, we've been waiting forever. That's not fair to the kids." "I saw the whole thing," said a woman near the front, her phone raised. "It looked like he didn't want to take a picture with the boy." Clara turned sharply. The woman had been filming, and now her phone was pointed at Clara and João. "Is that true?" the woman pressed. "Did Santa refuse to take a picture with your son?" Clara stood, shielding João from the growing crowd's attention. "I don't want any trouble," she said, her voice calm but firm. The woman lowered her phone, but the damage was done. The murmurs turned into a cacophony of voices, some sympathetic, others indignant. "I can't believe this," someone said. "It's Christmas, for crying out loud." Clara bent down to João's level again. "Let's go, honey. We can come back later." João nodded silently, clinging to her hand as they weaved through the crowd. Clara's face burned with humiliation, her heart pounding in her chest. As they exited the mall, the cold air hit Clara like a slap. She glanced down at Joao, who looked up at her with wide, questioning eyes. "Did I do something wrong, Mom?" he asked softly. Clara crouched in front of him, cupping his face in her hands. "You did nothing wrong," she said firmly. "You're perfect, Joao. Don't ever forget that." But even as she spoke the words, doubt gnawed at her. How could she shield him from a world so ready to crush his innocence? Clara couldn't shake the events of the day as she walked Joao home. His usual chatter was replaced by an uncharacteristic silence. She glanced down at him, his small hand still gripping hers tightly. His head hung low, and his steps lacked the bounce of his usual energy. The weight of what had happened felt suffocating, and Clara struggled to push away the lump rising in her throat. Back at their modest apartment, Clara set down the shopping bag containing the small gift she had managed to buy over the past few weeks. Joao wandered to the couch and sat quietly, staring out the window at the Christmas lights strung along the neighboring buildings. "Sweetheart," Clara began softly, sitting beside him. "Do you want to talk about what happened today?" Joao shrugged, still avoiding her gaze. "The other kids got to take pictures with Santa," he mumbled. "Why didn't he want me?" Clara took a deep breath, steadying her emotions. "Sometimes, people make decisions based on things they don't understand," she said carefully. "It's not your fault, Joao. It's never your fault." Joao finally looked up at her, his wide eyes searching hers for reassurance. "But he didn't like me," he whispered. Her heart broke at his words, but Clara refused to let this moment define her son's joy or his self-worth. "Listen to me," she said firmly, cupping his small face in her hands. "You are amazing, Joao. Never let anyone make you feel like you are less than that. You hear me?" Joao nodded slowly, though the sadness lingered in his expression. After tucking him into bed later that evening, Clara found herself pacing the small living room. The incident at the mall replayed in her mind like a bad movie she couldn't turn off. She thought about the way the crowd had murmured, the disbelief and quiet outrage of the onlookers. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her friend and co-worker, Maya. "Maya, Clara, I heard what happened at the mall. Are you okay?" Clara hesitated for a moment before replying. "Clara, I'm fine. Joao's hurt, though. That's what matters." Almost immediately, Maya replied. "Maya, people are talking about it online. Someone posted a video of what happened. It's going viral." Clara's stomach tightened. She hadn't even considered that the incident might follow them beyond the confines of the mall. She opened the social media app, and sure enough, the video was there. It showed Joao walking hesitantly towards Santa, the sudden dismissal, and the murmurs from the crowd. The comments were a mix of outrage and sympathy. "Unbelievable. How could someone act like this, especially during Christmas? This is heartbreaking. That poor child. We need to do better. Racism has no place, especially not in moments meant to spread joy." Clara scrolled through the comments, a strange mix of anger and validation bubbling inside her. For so long, she had felt invisible, her struggles unseen. Now, strangers were voicing the injustice she had faced her entire life. Maya called her moments later, her voice filled with concern. "Clara, are you okay? I can't believe this happened." "I don't know, Maya," Clara admitted. "I just wanted Joao to have a magical Christmas moment. Now he's hurt, and everyone's talking about us like we're some sort of spectacle." "But Clara, maybe this is a chance to speak out," Maya said. "What happened wasn't okay, and people need to see that this kind of behavior has consequences." Clara hesitated. She had always preferred to keep her head down and avoid conflict, especially when it came to situations like this. But when she thought of Joao, his small voice asking why Santa didn't want him. Something shifted inside her. "You might be right," Clara said slowly. "But where do I even start?" "Let the video speak for itself," Maya suggested. "People are already paying attention. Maybe it's time to share your side of the story." That night, after hours of wrestling with her thoughts, Clara opened her social media app. Her hands trembled as she typed, but her resolve grew with every word. "Clara, today, my son Joao experienced something no child should ever go through. He was so excited to meet Santa, but instead, he was met with rejection. As a mother, it's painful to see your child's joy taken away like that. This is the reality for so many families, and it needs to change. Every child deserves to feel valued and loved, especially at Christmas." She hesitated for a moment before hitting post. Once it was live, she set her phone down and exhaled deeply. Clara didn't expect the post to change much, but she also couldn't shake the feeling that this small act of courage might be the start of something bigger, not just for her, but for Joao, and for every parent who had ever felt the sting of injustice. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the soft hum of the city outside, Clara made a silent promise. She would not let this be the moment that defined her son's Christmas, or his spirit. The morning after Clara shared her post, she woke up to an unusual flurry of notifications on her phone. Messages, comments, and shares had poured in overnight. Her simple post, meant to voice her pain and frustration, had gained traction in a way she never anticipated. The video of the incident had been reposted countless times, accompanied by her heartfelt message. Joao was still asleep, his little body tucked under a warm blanket. Clara sat at the kitchen table with her coffee, staring at the screen in disbelief. Among the messages, there were comments from strangers expressing support, anger, and solidarity. One in particular stood out. "At Change Starts Here. Clara, your courage in sharing this is inspiring. I run a nonprofit focused on racial equality and would love to connect with you. We want to make sure Joao knows how special he is." Clara wasn't sure how to respond. She had never sought attention, much less become the focal point of such a large conversation. She set her phone down and focused on getting through the day, unsure what would come next. When Joao woke up, she noticed a faint sadness still lingering in his eyes. She decided they needed a distraction. "How about we bake some cookies today?" she suggested brightly. Joao perked up slightly. "Can we make the chocolate chip ones?" "Of course," Clara smiled, ruffling his hair. "The gooier the better." As they baked together, mixing dough and sneaking bites of chocolate chips, Clara's phone buzzed incessantly. Joao noticed the flashes of light from the screen. "Why is your phone making so much noise, Mama?" "Oh, just some messages," Clara said, trying to keep her tone casual. "People saw what happened at the mall and want to talk about it." Joao tilted his head. "Are they mad at me?" "No, my love," Clara said quickly, kneeling to his level. "They're mad at what happened to you, and they're on our side. They want to help." Joao nodded slowly, his little fingers digging into the cookie dough. "Will the Santa Man be nice next time?" Clara didn't have an easy answer. "I hope so, Joao. I really do." Later that afternoon, Clara received a call from the manager of the shopping mall. She hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. Ms. Mendez, a polished voice said on the other end, "Yes, this is Clara. This is Mr. Reynolds, the mall manager. First, let me say how deeply sorry I am for what happened yesterday. It's unacceptable, and I assure you we're taking this matter very seriously." Clara gripped the edge of the counter. "And what does that mean exactly?" "We've already terminated the Santa actor from his position," Mr. Reynolds explained. We're also organizing a public apology and offering Joao the opportunity to come back for a private meeting with a new Santa. We want to make things right." Clara's jaw tightened. "You think replacing the actor will fix this? My son's joy was stolen, and no apology can erase that." There was a pause on the line. "You're right, Ms. Mendez. It's not enough, but we want to listen and learn. If there's anything we can do, anything at all, please don't hesitate to let us know." Clara hung up, feeling a mixture of vindication and exhaustion. The mall's swift response was a start, but it felt reactive, like a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound. By evening, Clara received another unexpected call, this time from the nonprofit that had commented on her post. The woman on the line introduced herself as Elena Carter, the founder of Change Starts Here. "Clara, your story has struck a chord with so many people," Elena said warmly. "We'd love to invite you and Joao to our annual holiday event. It's a celebration for families and kids, focused on empowerment and joy. I think Joao could use a reminder of how special he is, and we'd be honored to have you both." Clara hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure. Everything feels overwhelming right now." "I understand completely," Elena said, "but this could be an opportunity to turn a painful moment into something meaningful, not just for Joao, but for other families too. No pressure, of course. Just think about it." After hanging up, Clara sat on the couch, watching Joao as he played with his toys. She thought about the weight of their experience and the unexpected attention it had garnered. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe this was an opportunity to do more than just react, to create something positive out of their pain. That night, as she tucked Joao into bed, he looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mama, why do people want to talk to us?" Clara stroked his hair gently. "Because sometimes when something unfair happens, talking about it helps people understand. And when people understand, they can make things better." Joao nodded sleepily. "Do you think we'll see a nice Santa one day?" "I think so, Joao," Clara whispered. "And when we do, it'll be even more special." The events of the day swirled in Clara's mind as she lay in bed that night. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope, not just for Joao, but for herself. She wasn't sure what the days ahead would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She would do everything in her power to ensure her son grew up in a world that valued his joy and dignity. As the city lights twinkled outside, Clara made a decision. She would attend the holiday event. Not for the mall, not for the nonprofit, but for Joao, and for every child who deserved to feel the magic of the season, no matter who they were. The holiday event was set to take place the following weekend, and Clara spent the days leading up to it filled with a mix of anticipation and nerves. She wanted Joao to enjoy himself, to feel the joy he'd been denied at the mall, but the weight of everything that had happened still lingered. Every time she thought of stepping into a room full of strangers, many of whom knew about their story, her chest tightened. Joao, on the other hand, seemed excited. Clara hadn't told him much about the event, just that it was a party where he'd meet other kids and have fun. He had chosen his favorite red sweater and a pair of jeans, insisting on wearing his tiny Santa hat. Watching his enthusiasm gave Clara the strength to push past her own reservations. The day of the event arrived, and Clara drove Joao to the community center where it was being held. The building was modest but warmly decorated, with twinkling lights wrapped around railings and a cheerful banner that read, "Celebrate joy, embrace unity." As they entered, Clara immediately noticed the buzz of activity. Volunteers in festive attire were setting up tables with crafts and games. Families chatted while children darted around, their laughter echoing in the room. Despite her initial hesitation, Clara began to feel a sense of comfort in the welcoming atmosphere. A woman approached them with a radiant smile. "You must be Clara and Joao," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Elena Carter. It's so wonderful to finally meet you." Clara shook her hand, her grip firm despite her nerves. "Thank you for inviting us. This is a lot more than I expected. We wanted to make sure it was special," Elena replied, kneeling to greet Joao. "And you must be Joao. I've heard you love cookies. Did you know we have a cookie decorating station over there?" Joao's eyes lit up. "Really? Can I go, Mama?" Clara smiled and nodded. "Go ahead, sweetheart. I'll be right here." Elena watched as Joao ran off, her expression soft. "He's a beautiful boy," she said, "and he's lucky to have a mother like you." Clara glanced at her son, who was already engrossed in squeezing frosting onto a cookie. "I'm the lucky one," she said quietly. Throughout the afternoon, Clara found herself relaxing. She spoke with other parents and volunteers, many of whom shared their own stories of navigating challenges and triumphs. For the first time, she felt like she was part of a larger community, a network of people who understood, who cared, and who were determined to create a better world. Joao, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. He decorated cookies, made ornaments, and even joined a group of kids playing a game of tag. Seeing him laugh so freely brought tears to Clara's eyes. As the event went on, Elena took the stage to address the attendees. "Thank you all for being here today," she began. "This time of year is about more than just gifts and decorations. It's about coming together, about love and understanding. And today, we're reminded that even in the face of injustice, we have the power to create change, starting in our own communities." She paused, scanning the room. "One story that touched me deeply is that of Clara and her son, Joao. Their experience resonated with so many of us, and it's a reminder of why we do what we do. Clara, would you mind saying a few words?" Clara's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to speak and felt her stomach churn at the thought. But as the room turned toward her, she saw Joao smiling at her from across the room, his face lit up with joy. Summoning her courage, Clara stepped onto the stage. The microphone felt heavy in her hand as she looked out at the crowd. "I'm not used to speaking in front of people," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But I want to thank you all for welcoming us here today. What happened to Joao at the mall? It broke my heart. No parent should ever have to see their child feel less than because of the color of their skin." The room was silent, her words sinking in. "But today," she continued, her voice growing steadier, "I've seen something beautiful. I've seen kindness, connection, and hope. And I realize that while we can't erase the pain of what happened, we can choose to stand together and make sure it doesn't happen again. Not to Joao, not to anyone." The room erupted in applause. Clara felt tears welling up as she handed the microphone back to Elena, who gave her a reassuring nod. As the event wound down, Elena approached Clara once more. "You have a powerful voice, Clara," she said, "and a story that needs to be heard. If you're interested, I'd love for you to work with us, maybe speak at more events, help us with the outreach." Clara hesitated. The idea of sharing her story on a larger scale was daunting, but the thought of making a difference was compelling. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Elena smiled. "That's all I ask." That night, as they drove home, Joao was fast asleep in the back seat, clutching a candy cane he'd won in a raffle. Clara glanced at him in the rearview mirror, her heart swelling with love and determination. For the first time since the incident at the mall, she felt a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her and Joao anymore. It was about every child, every parent, and every person who had ever been made to feel less than. And Clara was ready to fight for them. The weeks following the community Christmas event were a blur of activity. Clara had found herself involved in various local initiatives aimed at supporting families and children. And with each new project, she felt more empowered. She wasn't just a mother trying to protect her son anymore. She was becoming a voice for those who had suffered silently for too long. One chilly January afternoon, Clara found herself sitting in the local community center, listening to a meeting about the upcoming Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebrations. The room was filled with faces she now recognized, each person contributing ideas to ensure the event would reflect the values of unity and progress they all believed in. Elena was leading the discussion, her energy contagious. "This year, we're focusing on the theme of resilience," she said, looking around the room. "We've all experienced hardships, but how we rise up from them is what defines us." Clara felt a spark ignite within her. She had been reflecting on her own journey, how far she had come since the incident with Joao and the Santa at the mall, and realized that resilience had become her second nature. She raised her hand, her voice steady despite the nerves that were creeping in. "I'd like to help organize a story-sharing session for the event. I think hearing personal stories of strength can inspire more people than we know." Elena smiled, nodding her approval. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Clara. Your story alone could have a powerful impact." Clara hadn't expected to be asked to speak at the event, but the thought of sharing her journey, of not just what had happened to Joao, but the emotional toll it had taken on her as a mother, seemed like the right step. She was no longer just a participant. She was a leader in her own right, and this was her chance to use her voice for something bigger than herself. The days leading up to the celebration were filled with preparations. Clara juggled the work at the community center with her responsibilities at home, ensuring Joao was involved in his school activities while also making time to rehearse the speech she had begun writing. She had to keep it together. She wanted to show Joao that no matter how hard life could get, you could always rise and stand tall. The night before the event, Clara couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, replaying the speech in her mind over and over again. Every word felt crucial. Every pause needed to be just right. She wanted to make an impact, not just on the crowd, but on herself too. This was her moment to solidify everything she had been fighting for, to show herself that she was capable of turning pain into purpose. At 6 a.m., Joao came into her room, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, are you awake?" Clara smiled, pulling him into the bed beside her. "I am now. What's up, buddy? Are you nervous about speaking today?" Clara chuckled softly. "I'm a little nervous, but I know it's the right thing to do. It's about making things better, not just for you, but for everyone." Joao snuggled closer to her. "I think you're going to be amazing, Mom." She squeezed his hand, feeling a wave of gratitude for his constant belief in her. "Thanks, Joao. That means the world to me." The event took place in a large hall filled with rows of chairs and a stage at the front, draped in red, white, and blue banners. The crowd was a mix of families, community members, and local leaders. Clara stood behind the curtain, her heart pounding. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but there was no turning back now. "Clara, you're up next," Elena's voice called from behind her. Clara took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of the crowd's gaze on her as she walked to the podium. When she reached the microphone, she looked out into the audience, trying to steady her racing pulse. "Good afternoon, everyone," Clara began, her voice louder than she expected, but steady. "My name is Clara, and I'm here to share my story. It's not just my story, though. It's a story about every parent who has ever had to watch their child face prejudice, about every person who's ever felt like they didn't belong, about every community that's ever been divided by hate." She paused, gathering her thoughts, her gaze finding Joao in the crowd. He was sitting next to Elena, smiling up at her with pride. Not long ago, I took my son to a shopping mall to meet Santa, Clara continued, her voice softening. What should have been a joyful experience turned into something painful when the Santa refused to let him take a photo with him, simply because of the color of his skin. The room was silent. Clara could feel the tension, but she pushed forward. That moment broke me, but it also changed me. I realized that silence only perpetuates injustice, and if I didn't do something, my son, and others like him, would continue to face this kind of treatment. Her hands gripped the podium. But I'm not here just to talk about pain. I'm here to talk about resilience. Because despite the hurt, we have a choice. We can either let hate define us, or we can rise above it. I chose to rise. Clara felt a wave of emotions flood over her, but she continued. And that's why I'm standing here today, to say that we can do better, that we have to do better, for our children, for our communities, for everyone who's ever been made to feel less than. We are strong, and we are worthy. And together, we will create a world where our differences make us stronger, not weaker. As Clara finished, the room erupted into applause. The overwhelming support and warmth from the crowd filled her heart. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She had shared her truth, and in doing so, had taken another step toward healing. For herself, for João, and for all those who had been silenced for too long. That night, as Clara and João sat together on the couch, Clara couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. It wasn't just about one speech or one event. It was about a new beginning, a step toward a brighter future, where injustice no longer had a place. João leaned his head on her shoulder. "Mom, I think you changed things today." Clara kissed his forehead. "We changed things together." And for the first time in a long time, Clara felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. It was just the beginning of something greater than herself, something that would ripple out far beyond her own family and into the hearts of those who needed it most. The new year arrived quietly, but Clara could feel a shift in the air. The success of the Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration and the way the community had come together gave her hope. It was as if the collective energy from all those who had shared their stories, listened to each other, and worked together had infused the city with something more powerful than any one of them had imagined. A sense of unity. On New Year's Eve, as the city twinkled with festive lights, Clara found herself reflecting on everything that had happened in the last few months. It had been a roller coaster of emotions, but somehow she had come out stronger. More importantly, João had too. He seemed more confident now, more assured in himself, no longer carrying the burden of being a victim of racism, but starting to understand his place in a much larger story, one of change and resistance. Clara was sitting by the window of her modest apartment, watching the fireworks in the distance. João had fallen asleep beside her, his head resting on her lap, still innocent to the weight of the world that sometimes felt so heavy on her shoulders. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel lighter. The fight wasn't over, but they had taken one significant step forward, and it was enough for now. Her phone buzzed, and Clara picked it up to see a message from Elena, one of the community leaders she had grown close to. "Happy New Year, Clara. I just wanted to say that you've been an inspiration to so many. Your speech on MLK Day was powerful, and I believe it's the start of something much bigger. Keep pushing, keep fighting. We're with you." Clara smiled softly. The words felt like a gentle reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. She had allies, people who believed in what she was doing and were willing to stand by her. That meant the world. As midnight approached, Clara took a deep breath, letting go of the uncertainty that had clouded her mind in the past. This year would be different. She promised herself that. She wasn't just going to move through life, waiting for the next injustice to unfold. She was going to act, to build, to lead, and to keep raising her voice. She was no longer just a mother, a woman who had been wronged. She was a force for change. The countdown on the television began, and Clara turned her attention to the screen, her hand gently resting on Joao's head. The seconds ticked away, and as the clock struck midnight, she kissed her son's forehead, whispering softly, "Happy New Year, my love." Joao stirred and woke up just in time to hear the cheers and see the fireworks lighting up the sky. His eyes widened in awe, and he smiled, his face glowing with excitement. "Mama, this is amazing," he exclaimed, sitting up. Clara chuckled, her heart swelling with pride. "It is, baby. It's a new year, a new beginning, and we're going to make it count." The days following New Year's Day were filled with reflection and planning. Clara had never been one for New Year's resolutions, but this year was different. She set goals, realistic ones. She wanted to get more involved in local politics, to have a direct hand in shaping policies that would benefit her community. She wanted to see real change in the way people thought and acted, not just in terms of racism, but in how society as a whole viewed fairness, equality, and justice. At the same time, she worked tirelessly to ensure Joao's education and mental health were prioritized. He had always been a bright child, but now Clara noticed something different in him. His curiosity had deepened, and he began asking more questions about history, about why people treated others differently based on the color of their skin, and what he could do to make a difference. Clara was proud to see her son thinking critically about the world, and she promised herself that she would do whatever it took to help him navigate it. But the work wasn't easy. The systems in place, the ones that allowed the racism they had experienced to persist, were stubborn and resistant to change. Clara was no stranger to the slow pace of progress, but her recent experiences gave her the energy to keep pushing forward. She no longer saw herself as a passive bystander. She was a participant, a leader, someone who could make a difference. And that sense of agency was everything. One afternoon, while Clara was reviewing some materials for an upcoming community meeting, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello," Clara answered, curious. "Hi, is this Clara?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Rebecca. I'm with the city council. We've been following the work you've been doing with the community, and I must say, we're impressed. We'd like to offer you an opportunity to become more involved in some of the local initiatives aimed at addressing racial inequality in the city." Clara's heart skipped a beat. This was the kind of opportunity she had been working for. "I'm listening," she said, leaning forward in her chair. A week later, Clara stood in front of a small group of local leaders, her heart racing as she prepared to speak at the city council meeting. She had come a long way from that Christmas Eve at the mall, where she had felt helpless and defeated. Now, she was in a position to actually influence change, to speak up for those who had been silenced for far too long. She could feel the weight of the moment as she looked around the room at the faces of the people who had supported her, who had given her this opportunity. "I'm here today because I believe in the power of unity and the strength that comes from working together," Clara began, her voice steady. "But I also know that unity can't come without justice. We need to face the hard truths and build a future where every child, regardless of their race, can grow up with the same opportunities and the same dignity." As she spoke, Clara felt the familiar rush of purpose flood through her veins. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was speaking for every mother, every child, every person who had ever been made to feel small because of the color of their skin. And she was doing it with courage, with determination, and with the support of the people who believed in her. Clara left the meeting that day with a sense of accomplishment, but she knew the journey had only just begun. She had big plans for the future, but the most important one was ensuring that Joao grew up in a world where he was not just seen, but celebrated for who he was in all his complexity. And for the first time in a long while, Clara felt ready to face whatever came next. As winter melted into spring, the city began to pulse with a renewed sense of hope. Clara had been invited to speak at various community events, and her voice had become a beacon for many, inspiring others to stand up against the injustices they faced. It wasn't easy. The fight was far from over. But Clara had found a rhythm, a way of navigating the world with purpose and determination. The more she fought, the more she realized how much work still needed to be done. But she no longer felt overwhelmed. Each step, no matter how small, was a victory in itself. One evening, Clara sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea warming her hands as she glanced over her notes for a speech she was preparing for an upcoming rally. João was in his room, studying for school, but she could hear his voice occasionally calling out to her, asking questions or just sharing little pieces of his day. He had grown so much over the past few months, and Clara couldn't help but feel immense pride in how far he had come. Not only was he excelling academically, but he was also becoming more aware of the world around him. "Mom, what does it mean to fight for justice?" João had asked her the night before, his innocent curiosity still a reminder of the challenges he would one day face as a young black man. Clara had paused, not sure how to answer in a way that wouldn't feel too heavy for him. But she knew she had to be honest. "It means standing up for what's right, even when it's hard," she'd said softly. "It means speaking out when you see something wrong, even when other people may not want to hear it. And it means helping others do the same, so no one ever feels alone in their struggle." That conversation lingered in Clara's mind as she prepared for the rally. It was a moment of clarity, a reminder that the fight she was leading was not only for herself, but for João and for every future generation that would follow. The day of the rally arrived, and Clara stood in front of a crowd of over 1,000 people in the heart of the city. The air was thick with anticipation, and the energy was palpable. She could see faces of all ages, all races, united by a single purpose: to demand justice. Her heart raced, but she steadied herself. She had spoken in front of crowds before, but today felt different. The stakes were higher, and this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the future. It was about ensuring that the city she loved could be a place where everyone, regardless of their skin color, was treated with respect and dignity. As Clara stepped up to the microphone, the crowd fell silent. The quiet was almost deafening, and in that moment, Clara felt every ounce of the responsibility she carried. But she was ready. "Today, we stand together not just as a community, but as a force for change," Clara began, her voice strong and clear. "We are here because we believe that everyone deserves a fair chance, a chance to live, to dream, and to be free of the chains of prejudice that have held us down for far too long." The crowd erupted into applause, and Clara took a deep breath before continuing. "This is not just about Black lives. This is about all of us. This is about human lives, about fighting for equality and justice for everyone, no matter their race, their gender, or where they come from." Clara paused, scanning the crowd. She could see so many faces of hope, faces that had been scarred by the same injustices, but were now fighting for something better. She could feel the weight of her words, but she also felt the fire of determination burning brighter inside her than ever before. For too long, we've allowed systems of oppression to dictate our lives. But today, we say no more. Today, we demand change, and we will not rest until that change is made. Another cheer rose from the crowd, and Clara's heart swelled with pride. She had started this journey feeling lost, unsure of where to begin. But now, she was leading, she was guiding, and she was witnessing firsthand the power of unity. As she finished her speech, Clara was overwhelmed with a sense of accomplishment. The crowd was buzzing with energy, and Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude for all the people who had supported her along the way. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but it was one she was willing to walk. She was no longer just a woman who had been wronged. She was a force of change, and she had the power to create a better world. That evening, Clara and João sat down for dinner, the warmth of their small apartment wrapping around them like a cozy blanket. João was excited about the rally, eager to tell his friends about the experience. But Clara was focused on something else. "You did great today, Mom," João said with a smile. "I think you really made a difference." Clara looked at him, her heart swelling. "I didn't do it alone, João. I did it with all of you, with everyone who believes in this cause. And we'll keep fighting every single day." João nodded, his young mind grasping the significance of what his mother had accomplished. He might not fully understand the weight of the battle ahead, but he could feel the change. And that in itself was enough for now. As the night wore on, Clara couldn't help but feel hopeful. For the first time in a long while, the future seemed bright. There was still much work to be done, but with every action, every voice, and every step they took together, Clara knew that change was coming. And it was coming faster than anyone could have ever imagined.